Lady Charlotte Ashford had been the Duchess of Windermere for precisely one night when she discovered that her husband did not consider her worth lying to. He had not even bothered to lower his voice. She had been descending the east staircase of Windermere Park at midnight, still dressed, because she had never managed to undress in a strange house without feeling like a trespasser. When his words rose from the drawing-room below and found her on the 4th step, like a hand pressed flat against her chest, I was never supposed to love her. Then, softer, the way a man speaks when he is confessing rather than conversing, and God help me, I have tried not to, Charlotte did not move. The candle in her hand burned absolutely still, because she had gone absolutely still. Because something in her had understood before her mind had caught up that the her he was whispering about was not the woman she had become 12 hours ago in the chapel at St. George's. It was someone else entirely. Someone who occupied a space in the Duke of Windermere that his new wife had not been offered so much as a glimpse of. She stood on the 4th step. She counted her own heartbeats the way her mother had once taught her to count them during her father's rages. Steadily, privately, as though the heart were a clock one could simply choose to regulate. What she did not do was go down the remaining 4 steps and open the drawing-room door and demand to know the name of the woman her husband had never been supposed to love and had been, by the sound of it, failing to resist. She had been raised in a house where the wrong question, asked at the wrong moment, could cost a woman everything she had not yet managed to secure. And Charlotte had secrets of her own. Secrets that made her position in this marriage considerably more fragile than the Duke yet knew. Secrets that his discovery of, at the wrong time, in the wrong order, could unravel not merely her happiness, but her entire reason for having said yes to him in the first place. She turned. She went back up the stairs. She did not sleep. By morning, she had decided only one thing. She needed to understand who the woman was before the woman had the opportunity to take full measure of her. The name came to her before noon. Not through asking. Charlotte was too careful for asking. It came the way most useful information comes to women in great houses, through the particular inattention of servants who have not yet calibrated what silence looks like in front of a new mistress. She was sitting at the writing desk in the morning room, composing a letter she had no intention of sending, when she heard the under-housemaid say it to the footman in the corridor outside. Not just the name, but the context she needed with it. Lady Genevieve was here till near on midnight the wedding night, the maid was saying, low but not low enough. Same as she always is when he's in a state. She comes Thursdays regular, but she came Wednesday too, the night before the wedding, and she was still in the drawing-room when I came down at 6 to lay the fires. The footman said something Charlotte could not catch. Well, the maid said, she's been his closest counsel since before I came to this house. Draw your own conclusions. Their footsteps moved away, and Charlotte was alone again with her unfinished letter and the name folded quietly into her memory. She did not ask Mrs. Holt about Lady Genevieve Hartwell directly. She asked instead about the wider landscape of the Duke's social obligations, who called regularly, who had standing invitations, who might be expected over the hunting season. Mrs. Holt was a precise woman of indeterminate age, who delivered information the way a solicitor delivers a bill, accurately without warmth, with the faint implication that acting upon it was entirely one's own affair. She listed 7 names before she arrived at Genevieve's. Lady Genevieve Hartwell, Mrs. Holt said, folding her hands, is the daughter of the late Earl of Denmere. His Grace has known her since childhood. She calls on Thursdays when she is in the county. She was at the wedding, Charlotte said. Not a question. She was, Your Grace. And the night before. The stillness this time was careful. Lady Genevieve arrived the evening before, yes. To assist with some arrangements, I believe. Charlotte nodded and moved the conversation elsewhere. She noted the precise quality of Mrs. Holt's attention, not discomfort, but the look of a woman deciding how much of what she knows belongs to the person asking. Thursday arrived in the manner of things one has been dreading. Grey sky, light rain, the particular hush of a house that has been, without announcement, prepared for a visitor. Charlotte was in the library when she heard the carriage on the drive. She did not go to the window. She waited 3 full minutes, long enough for the visitor to be received and shown through, and then she went downstairs. Lady Genevieve Hartwell was not what Charlotte had assembled in her mind over 4 sleepless days. She had expected beauty deployed like a weapon. She had expected the specific confidence of a woman who has been assured for years that she is irreplaceable. She had expected, in short, a woman who would look at Charlotte and find her wanting in a way that could not be argued with. What she found instead was a woman of perhaps 28, quietly pretty rather than striking, with steady grey eyes, and a quality of attention that reminded Charlotte, startlingly, of her own mother. Genevieve rose when Charlotte entered the drawing-room, and her curtsy was correct without being excessive, and she said, "Your Grace, I have been looking forward to meeting you," with the manner of someone who meant it and knew it would not be entirely believed. Charlotte sat. Oliver. She had begun, privately, to call the Duke by his given name, since she could not yet bring herself to use it aloud, was standing by the window in the attitude she had already come to recognize as his default posture in rooms that required him to feel things he had not planned for. Shoulders set. Expression composed to the point of blankness. The look of a man who had built himself a very fine wall and was perpetually surprised when it failed to make him comfortable. He introduced them with the precise brevity of a man performing an obligation. Charlotte smiled and accepted tea and asked Genevieve about her recent time in Bath with the calm interest of a woman who had nothing in particular to conceal. Genevieve answered with equal calm, and the 3 of them conducted for the better part of an hour a perfectly civil conversation about roads, assemblies, and the relative merits of the western counties. While beneath it, Charlotte felt the room hum with the weight of everything not being said. She learned 3 things in that hour. The first was that Genevieve looked at Oliver with the particular clarity of a woman who had known a man long enough to have stopped romanticizing him, not the hunger of a woman in love, something older and more complicated. The second was that Oliver looked at Genevieve with the expression of a man in the presence of his own conscience. The third was that when Genevieve rose to leave and said at the door, without quite looking at either of them, "I hope you will both come to dine on Friday," the both was weighted. She was not extending an invitation. She was extending something closer to an olive branch. Charlotte said they would be delighted. Oliver said nothing. Charlotte accepted this as his answer. That evening she received the letter. It had been forwarded from her father's house in the circuitous way of correspondence, intended to arrive quietly, addressed in a hand she had not seen in 2 years, but recognized instantly. Small and slightly slanted. The letters of someone who had learned to write in difficult conditions and had never quite lost the urgency of it. She read it in full before deciding what to do with it. It was 5 lines. It asked nothing except that she remember what had been agreed. It reminded her that agreements made in desperation were agreements nonetheless. It stated, with the flat patience of a man who had done this before, that if he received no reply within a fortnight, he would present himself at Windermere in person to discuss the matter directly. Charlotte held the letter over the candle until it was gone. Then she sat for a long time in the chair by the window and thought about the particular cruelty of bad timing. The secret, to speak plainly, was this. Lord Ashford was not her father, not in blood. Her mother had loved another man before her marriage and had been discovered, and had been made to pay for it in ways Charlotte was still, in some respects, paying for herself. Lord Ashford had known since Charlotte was an infant. He had kept her, raised her, presented her into society under his name. Not from love, Charlotte had understood this early, but because the alternative was a scandal that would have cost him more than she did. He had arranged her marriage to Oliver for the same calculation. The Ashford family's finances required the Duke's alliance, and he had gambled that a secret kept for 22 years would keep a little longer. He had told Charlotte on the morning of her engagement that Oliver would not have her if he knew. He had said it in the tone of a warning. Charlotte had long understood it was also a leash. She was still at the window when she heard Oliver's footsteps pass her door and continue down the corridor without pausing. She thought, if he knew, he would not merely pause, he would stop entirely. The following morning, she asked Oliver directly about Lady Genevieve Hartwell. Not about the drawing room or the wedding night. She chose a narrower entry point, the way one tests ice before committing one's full weight to it. "She seems fond of you," Charlotte said, over breakfast, in the mild tone she reserved for observations she intended to carry further. Oliver looked up from his correspondence. He had a habit of treating breakfast as an extension of his study. Letters open, attention divided, body present, and mind elsewhere. He looked at her now with the expression of a man recalibrating. "We grew up on neighboring estates," he said. "Her father and mine were close. There is nothing remarkable in the friendship." "I did not say there was." He watched her for a moment. "No, you didn't. The silence between them was the particular kind that knows it is being used for something." "She lost her husband 3 years ago," Oliver said, his voice lowering slightly, "and has not had an easy time of it since. I have tried to be a reliable presence where I could." "It is not more than that," Charlotte said. "I see," and returned to her toast. What she saw was that he had answered a question she had not asked. She filed this away beside everything else she was collecting. Friday came. They drove to Genevieve's house, a modest property 4 miles east, and dined with her and her elderly aunt, and a neighboring clergyman who spoke exclusively about his roses. It was, in its surface texture, entirely unremarkable. But twice during the evening Charlotte caught Genevieve watching Oliver, with an expression that had nothing romantic in it. Only a kind of careful sorrow. The expression of a woman looking at something she has made peace with, but not forgotten. And once, briefly, Genevieve looked at Charlotte instead with something Charlotte could only describe as apology. Not guilt, apology. There is a difference. Guilt looks away. Apology holds the gaze. 12 days after Charlotte had burned the letter, Mr. Frederick Aldous arrived at Windermere. He came to the tradesman's entrance on a Tuesday morning and sent up a card stating he had business of a private nature pertaining to the Ashford family. Charlotte received him in the small parlour, alone, with the door closed. He had come, he said, not to cause difficulty. He repeated this twice, which was once more than an honest man needed to. His late employer, the solicitor Dowd of Bristol, recently deceased, had kept certain documents relating to the circumstances of Lady Charlotte Ashford's birth, and it had come to Mr. Aldous' attention that her Grace might benefit from knowing these documents existed before anyone else decided to make them known. He named a figure. Charlotte listened without expression. She told him she would require a week to arrange the sum and a means of delivery that did not involve him returning to Windermere. She said this in a tone that made clear she was accustomed to solving problems and considered him one. He left with the air of a man who had expected more resistance and was therefore marginally more concerned, not less. She did not go to Oliver that evening. She needed to think. She had learned, in the house of Lord Ashford, that decisions made in the first heat of a difficult moment were almost always worse than those made a day later in the cold. So she walked the park. She read. She sat across from Oliver at dinner and spoke of ordinary things and let him watch her with the careful attention she had noticed since the beginning. The look of a man trying to take the measure of someone he suspected was considerably more than he had bargained for. On the third day Genevieve came, not on a Thursday, on a Wednesday morning, without advance notice, on horseback rather than by carriage. Charlotte was informed by a maid who seemed uncertain whether to present the visit as expected or unexpected, and settled for presenting it without commentary. Genevieve was shown to the morning room. She stood when Charlotte entered and said, before Charlotte could speak, "I came because there is something I should have told you before the wedding. I did not. I am going to tell you now, if you will allow it." Charlotte sat. She gestured for Genevieve to do the same. "Oliver came to me the night of your wedding," Genevieve said, with the directness of a woman who had prepared this speech and intended to deliver it cleanly. "Not in the way you may have imagined. He came because he was frightened. He had not expected, had not permitted himself to expect, to feel anything when you walked toward him in that chapel. He had told himself the marriage was a practical arrangement, and that he was fully equal to conducting it as one." The dry note that entered her voice then was the humor of a woman who has known a man since boyhood and has stopped being surprised by him, only in the sense that she has stopped expecting better. He was wrong. Charlotte looked at her without speaking. He spent 2 hours in my drawing room, Genevieve continued, telling me that he was never supposed to have feelings for you, that it was not part of what he had agreed to, that he had no business feeling what he felt and intended very firmly to stop. She met Charlotte's eyes. He did not ask my advice. He rarely does. He simply needed to say it aloud to someone who would not be damaged by hearing it. He told me he had tried, since the moment he saw you at the altar, to feel nothing. That he had tried, as he put it, all the way home from the church. Charlotte understood then, with the particular clarity of a realization that has been waiting at the edge of one's understanding for some time, that she had been wrong about the shape of the wound. She had spent 3 weeks preparing to fight a rival who did not exist, carrying the weight of a betrayal that had never been committed, convincing herself that the distance in Oliver's manner was indifference when it was, in fact, its opposite. It was a man standing very still at the edge of something he was afraid to fall into. The her he had never been supposed to love was herself, and the trying not to was not absence of feeling. It was feeling, with all the channels stopped. "Why are you telling me this now?" Charlotte asked. "Because," Genevieve said simply, "I have watched you carry something for 3 weeks that you should not have had to carry alone. And because Oliver will not tell you himself. He will circle it indefinitely, improving slightly, retreating slightly, until one of you is too old to make proper use of the time." She held Charlotte's gaze. "I like you, Your Grace. I did not expect to. I hope to. There is a difference." Charlotte was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I have something to tell him also. Something I have been carrying since before the marriage." Genevieve said nothing. She waited the way a woman waits when she understands that silence is the right response. "If I tell him," Charlotte said carefully, "and he cannot accept it, I need to know what kind of man I am dealing with. Not the composed version, the one underneath." Genevieve considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "He is not a man who punishes people for things beyond their governance," she said at last. "He is a man who has punished himself extensively for things entirely beyond his. It makes him, in my experience, considerably more capable of mercy than he appears." Charlotte looked at her for a long moment. Then she rose, and Genevieve rose with her, and Charlotte said, "Will you stay for tea?" "I thought you would never ask," said Genevieve. Charlotte went to Oliver's study that evening. She did not rehearse it. She had decided somewhere between the morning room and now that rehearsal was a form of armor, and she was done with armor for tonight. He was at his desk when she entered. He rose. She gestured for him to sit, took the chair across from him, and looked at him directly in the way she had been, until now, careful to avoid. "I have been carrying something since before this marriage began," she said. "I had intended to manage it quietly for as long as I could. I can no longer do that." He set down his pen. He gave her his full attention in the way she had noticed he was capable of when he chose to stop dividing it. She told him, not everything at once, but the essential architecture of it, that Lord Ashford was not her father in blood, that her mother had loved another man before her marriage and had been made to pay for it, that a clerk named Aldous had come with documents and a price, that the man who had called himself her father had arranged this marriage knowing what he was concealing, had gambled that the secret would hold, and had told Charlotte that Oliver would not have her if he knew. A warning delivered in the tone of protection, and intended as a lock. When she finished, the fire had burned lower. Oliver had not moved. He said at last, "He told you I would not have you." "Yes, and you believed him." Charlotte met his eyes. "I had no reason to believe otherwise." He was silent for a long moment. The kind of silence that is not empty, but full. Full of a man taking account of something, and deciding what to do with the reckoning. "Lord Ashford required the connection this marriage provided," he said quietly. "He was in no position to let you refuse it. Telling you I would reject you if I knew was the most efficient way to ensure you would not come to me first." He said this not in Oliver's defense, nor Ashford's, but as a man identifying a mechanism that had been used against someone he was only now fully understanding he cared about. Charlotte said nothing. Something in her chest loosened by a degree she felt precisely. Oliver rose from the desk. He crossed the room and stood before her chair, and looked at her the way she had been waiting, without knowing it, to be looked at since the morning she became his wife. Directly, without the careful management of feeling, without the composure that was not composure, but distance wearing composure's clothes. "I will deal with Aldous," he said. "The documents will be purchased through my solicitor and destroyed before the week is out. If anything surfaces regardless, we face it as what we are." He did not waver. "You are the Duchess of Windermere. I did not give you that name to take it back at the first difficulty." Charlotte looked up at him. She thought of Genevieve saying, "He is a man who has punished himself, extensively, for things beyond his governance." She thought of her mother, who had loved and been punished for it. She thought of the long cost of always choosing the safer version of things, and what it eventually leaves a person with. "Genevieve came today," she said. He went very still. "She told me what you said to her the night of our wedding, what you meant by it." She held his gaze. "You told her you were never supposed to love me, that you had tried not to." She did not look away. "You should stop trying." He looked at her for a moment that had a different quality from all the moments that had preceded it. Open, undefended, the look of a man who has been running a considerable distance and has been told at last that he may stop. "I don't know," he said, "how to begin." "We don't begin again," Charlotte said. "There is nothing before this worth returning to. We simply begin." He held out his hand. She took it. They dealt with Mr. Aldous that week. Oliver's solicitor handled it with the cold efficiency of a man paid to make difficulties disappear before they became histories. The documents were purchased and destroyed. Lord Ashford received a brief letter from Oliver's solicitor in the days following, and never raised the subject with anyone again. Charlotte would sometimes think of it afterward, not with the shame she had anticipated, but with the equanimity of a woman who has survived her own worst fear, and discovered it was survivable. The fear, it turned out, had been considerably larger than the thing itself. Genevieve came on Thursdays, as she always had. She and Charlotte found each other over that autumn and winter, with the slow, surprised pleasure of two people who have been expecting the worst of each other, and encountered, instead, someone worth knowing. On a Thursday in November, after Oliver had stepped out to speak with his steward, and the two women were alone by the fire, Genevieve said, without preamble, "I should like us to be friends. Properly, not politely." "I thought we already were," Charlotte said. Genevieve looked at her with genuine surprise. Then she smiled, a real one, unguarded, the smile of a woman who does not smile easily and means it entirely when she does. "He chose well," she said. "Better than he deserved, if we are being accurate." "We are always being accurate," Charlotte said. "Yes," Genevieve agreed. "I think that's why it will last." By the following autumn, Charlotte was carrying their first child. Oliver began, without ceremony or announcement, to look at her. Not the wary, measuring attention of the early weeks, but something steadier and less defended. The look of a man who has decided, at last, to stop rationing himself. The child was a son. He arrived in March in the blue room at the top of the east wing, in the first pale light of morning. The portrait of Charlotte, Duchess of Windermere, was painted in the 3rd year of their marriage. It hangs in the upper gallery, where the light falls warmest at midday. A young woman in deep blue, one hand resting at her side, and her face turned 3/4 toward the viewer, expression composed and faintly lit, as though she has just understood something that has taken considerable time to become clear. In Charlotte's private sitting room, the room she used most, the room where the fire was always lit and the books were always open, hangs a smaller portrait. A woman with steady grey eyes and a quiet, direct expression, painted in the year of a long friendship's beginning. Beneath it, in Charlotte's own handwriting on a small card, the words, "Lady Genevieve Hartwell." The truest kind of friend. Visitors to the gallery sometimes ask about Charlotte's portrait. The story they are told is partial and true as far as it goes. And it leaves out the things that were never anyone else's to know. It leaves out the 4th step of the east staircase. It leaves out the letter turned to ash. It leaves out the morning a woman came on a Wednesday without warning and told the truth that a man had been circling for weeks because she had decided that the new Duchess deserved better than confusion, and that love, to function properly, requires accurate information. Some things are not left out because they are shameful. They are left out because they belong to the people who lived them. Charlotte Ashford had walked into a marriage in the dark, carrying a secret in each hand, listening for the sound of her own undoing. She had found instead, slowly, imperfectly, through the stubborn daily work of two people who had both been taught to hold themselves closed and were learning, together, to stop. Something she had not permitted herself to name until it was unmistakably true. A life built on honesty is not assembled in a single evening. It is built in increments. In the decision to speak when silence would be easier. In the willingness to extend trust before it has been fully earned. In the choice to let another person see the weight of what you have been carrying, and to find, against all prior evidence, that they do not put it down. Charlotte knew this better than most. She had walked into a great house as a stranger, with a husband who could not look at her and a secret that threatened everything, and she had made of all of it, patiently, honestly, without a fanfare, a life. It was, in the end, a very good one. If this story moved you, if you believe the love worth keeping is the kind built honestly out of the pieces two people are brave enough to lay between them, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel. There are more stories like Charlotte's waiting to find their way to you. Stories of women who were handed silence and made of it something that lasted. I would very much like for you to be here when the next one arrives.